Baiting bears for hunting with Donut's narrative really rubs people the wrong way, both hunters and non-hunters. It paints this image of bears getting into garbage and hunters are hunting them that way for clean, ethically sourced meat, and it just leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. So the last episode, I dealt with the hunting practice of baiting bears from a fair chase perspective. In this episode, I want to look at the impacts of baiting on bears themselves. In 2009, there was a study done in Canada that kind of looked at this broad question, and it sourced a bunch of studies from all over North America into a single paper. One of the things the study reported out on is that hunters tend to use artificial baits more in North America than natural baits. And the reason is that artificial baits were cheaper and more readily available. Of all the things they reported in this paper, one of the overall conclusions was that baiting bears itself didn't lead to more human-bear conflict. There was a study done in North Carolina that looked at the sugar addiction of bears from using candied baits. They found that the black bears lingered around the bait sites and they wouldn't even move off when humans came into the bait site. They also found that once the bait was removed, that bears continued to come and linger around those bait sites. Scientists started looking at the impacts of candied baits on black bears in North Carolina, and they found that it was leading to a sugar addiction that was causing tooth decay, hair loss, weight loss, and lethargy. One of the scientists actually likened the sugar addiction bears is to the addiction of humans on cocaine. So years ago, the North Carolina Bear Hunters Association engaged scientists at North Carolina University, and they conducted these studies, and they started to learn that the candied baits were having an impact on the health of bears. So the North Carolina Bear Hunters Association took it upon themselves to advance hunting regulation changes, and North Carolina then proceeded to ban the use of candied baits. However, they were finding in North Carolina that some hunters were using large candied blocks and placing them out to attract bears to a bait site, and then right prior to hunting season, they were removing the blocks and then hunting on the site, knowing that the sugar-addicted bears continued to come and visit a site that no longer had bait in it. In British Columbia, where I live, baiting of black bears isn't allowed. However, our hunting regulations prohibit the feeding of dangerous wildlife, regardless of hunting. Anybody that's found making attractants available to dangerous wildlife, being cougars, wolves, coyotes, or black bears, can be charged under the Wildlife Act. So this isn't something that could have been done in my jurisdiction, to place a bait prior to hunting season and then remove it in order to conform with the hunting laws. A study done in Colorado reported that black bears that were consuming human food were actually delaying going into hibernation, and that was actually leading to changes in the bear's body at a cellular level, which was actually causing the bears to age faster, to age prematurely. A study done in Michigan found that bears that were eating human food had reduced diversity of the microflora in their guts. And researchers, even though they couldn't prove it, pointed this out as a concern for bear health, that once the bears shifted from eating artificial human foods back to natural foods, would their guts be able to digest the high fiber diets that bears eat in order to maintain bear fitness and health? A study done in Wisconsin estimated that 40% of the black bear's diet came from bait stations. They also noted in the Wisconsin study that for the entire time that black bears were not in hibernation, there was only a 1-week period where they didn't have access to hunters' bait because the law prohibited the bait being available. Only 1 week out of the entire non-hibernation season. One of the things they also noted in Wisconsin is that years and years ago, black bears on average had between 2 and 3 cubs per litter. After the big boom in using baits and hunting in Wisconsin, scientists noted that black bears started to have between 3 and 4 cubs on average per litter. Now you might think, well, that's good, right? We're hunting bears. Baiting is making more bears, so hunters can harvest more. The downside was black bears are also predators of whitetails, which hunters like to hunt in the fall. So increasing the black bear population through baiting has the potential to have higher impacts on fawn recruitment. Now, a super interesting study done in Minnesota in the Eagle's Nest Township, this community, in order to prevent having problems with bears in the settled area, created these bait stations outside the communities where they fed bears and attracted bears away from the communities and people's homes. They've been doing this since 1961. And scientists conducted a long-term study of all the things that have taken place in the Eagle's Nest Township since the 1960s bait stations were established. And what they found was that black bears did not become lazy or dependent on human artificial foods. They didn't stop their natural foraging behavior. They didn't become aggressive. They didn't attack people. They didn't approach hikers or hunters, and they didn't break into homes. And their population didn't increase. In the Minnesota study, scientists reported that the black bears maintained their natural foraging behaviors, and they actually preferred foraging on wild foods over the food that was put in the bait stations. And consequently, black bears spent most of their time foraging on wild foods. Subadult bears that were born into the populations didn't concentrate around the bait stations, and they dispersed naturally back onto the landscape and found their own territories. And the bears were healthy and were successfully reproducing. 1985 in the township was a really droughty year, and a lot of the bears' natural wild foods failed to produce. What the study showed was that through augmentation of food in the bait sites, that township, out of all the surrounding areas in Minnesota, did not have human-bear conflict in the residential areas. So what's the takeaway here? I think there's a lesson to be learned from the North Carolina Bear Hunters Association. They worked with scientists from the university. They collected evidence, and they made a conscious decision to lobby for changes to the baiting regulations for hunting in North Carolina to prohibit the use of candied baits. They did this because they learned that their hunting practice was impacting the health of bears, and they wanted to protect baiting as a hunting practice. Every local situation is different, so there's no one solution fits all. If hunters want to protect the health of bears and the future of hunting, and they see that artificial baits are a risk to bear health and public acceptance of this hunting practice, then I encourage hunters to be the change agents like the North Carolina Bear Hunters Association. There's a saying that really seems to fit a lot of these situations in hunting today. Fight for what you want now, or fight against what you didn't want later.